Just going to test this out. Fantastic. Hi. Hey, everyone. My name's Aaron Dark. I'm a lead designer at Bankwest, and I acknowledge that I am the only thing standing between everyone here and a drink. So I promise to keep this short and sharp. Can I get it quickly, hands? Who here plays video games or has played video games in the last couple? Cool. That's a huge, overwhelming majority. All right, cool. I was worried I was going to have to bring this talk down to speak to everyone here, but it's really cool. It's really good to see that trend over the years that there's more casual and approachable, and we have these cozy genres of game where people are happy to farm and happy to look after pets and things like that. And they're a gamer now. I love it. It's fantastic. So why video games? Why do I want to talk about video games? I think video games are overlooked, and they're seen as childish, and they're seen as, when people think of gamification, they think of leaderboards and high scores, and there's so much more, so much deeper that you can go with that. And so I thought I'd come here and talk about that along with my experience of UX. And when you play games, you're dropped in these high-pressure scenarios, and in this presentation, I want to explore the strategies that deliver the right information at the right time so that users can make these decisions, and how we can actually take those techniques that are used and bring them back to our UX, our more corporate, slightly drier UX. So who am I to talk about this? I've started playing video games from a very, very young age. My first console was an Apple IIgs with a literal floppy disk that you would put in, and you'd have to write a piece of code to play the game, and there was even some games where you finished and you couldn't actually play the game again. We then talk about UX. When the Nintendo came out, we got the Atari, which was fun, but it's okay because we also became a Nintendo family, and that was back in the day where you had console wars going on, and it was like, my parents are English and Welsh, and I'm a Nintendo family. It was part of your DNA. There was Sony lovers over there. There was Sega on the horizon. You had to pick a side, pick a tribe. So we were Nintendo. The same thing happened. Super Nintendo came out. We got the original Nintendo. We finally caught up, and eventually we got to a point where we would get our own part-time jobs, and we'd be spending our own money on video games. And I don't think I couldn't remember a time in my life where I hadn't played video games at least once a month for the 34 odd years that I've been here. So I've played a lot of video games in my life. That went to adulthood and probably went out of control with some. I was pretty good at it though, hey. But it's okay, that's right, because it all, 3 years ago, my beautiful daughter Mackenzie came here, and all of those gaming sessions came to a grinding halt. And I got to take a reprieve and think about games a bit more tactfully and make those sessions a bit more purposeful. So I've been a designer for 10 years, a professional designer for 10 years. The first couple of years was as a graphic designer in print and brand. And then the second half of it was a transition to corporate UX and using Figma and problem solving and opening my eyes up to HCD and things like that. All concepts, that have come through design, and definitely aren't specific to design. It comes along in games as well. And so through the last 3 years, I've been picking up a program called Unity, which is a video game engine, and I've been making video game UI. And from someone who comes from graphic design and using those typical Adobe tools where everything is nice and easy, and coming to Unity, it is like playing on hard mode. There's no button for a drop shadow. You have to make a black tile Gaussian blur, explore it, and bring it into Unity. You have to make everything, in Illustrator first, and then you have to export them all as white assets and bring them in as one PNG at a time, the stroke, the background, and then use Unity to color in those assets, to recolor in what you've done. This is all for performance and things like that, because you don't want to overbloat your game. And worst of all, there's no auto layout. You can't actually, how do you design and how do you, but you become much more intentional with your design. and things that you bring in. You're not just clicking a button to make a drop shadow because it's there. If you want it there, you've definitely made that decision and you've done the work to bring it in. So imagine you're building a dashboard for a salesman. You've got all your open cases, you've got your leads, you've got a nice table view happening there. Then you've got an overarching progress on how everything's tracking, a little pipeline from start to finish. And this looks pretty good, right? This is all something that we'd be pretty comfortable with getting a brief and feeling we could complete. Now imagine there are triple, quadruple the cases. And imagine that all these cases needed to be finished by a close of business today. And imagine that that person was competing against another person. What decisions would you make within your UX toolkit that would enable your user to complete this extreme task? And how would you even begin? What would you even look at? Where would you draw your inspiration from? So video games lead to faster decisions that are no less accurate. That's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. I didn't realize by just playing games that I could make decisions faster, but apparently scientists told me so. So that's fantastic. And yeah, look where video games got me. I'm a Locknote speaker at UX Camp, right? And an interesting quote that comes out of that is that action video game players' brains are more efficient collectors of visual and auditory information, and therefore arrive at necessary threshold of information they need to make a decision much faster than non-gamers. And I was thinking, why is that? Is that because playing action video games puts you in scenarios that you're, much high pressure scenarios that you're not in everyday life? Maybe that's the case, but I'm tempted to believe that the job that we do as UXers directly affects this, and the UIs that are created deliver that information to those people, right? And it's exactly what we do. It's our job title: collect visual information to make a decision faster. It's what we want to give to our users. So if you take chess, for example, limited UI, there's an 8x8 grid and there's some different shapes for your pieces, and that's all you're given. After the first turn, both players have moved their pawn. There are now 400 possible outcomes that can happen from there. And then if you amplify that to the 7th turn, there's over 3.2 million different ways that this game could have played out. And so you can see how people dedicate their life to that. People write books on this, on how to take this information, make a decision, and react to it. And unless you're playing blitz chess, you've got a little bit of time to make this decision as well. But if you take a game like StarCraft 2, at any given time you have 100 trillion possible, I didn't even know that was a number, possible number of moves at any time. So StarCraft is a game, they call it an RTS, that's the genre of it. It's a real-time strategy. So the first word there, it's real-time. So that already, you don't have time to think, you have less time because someone else is doing the exact same thing as you. You have no time to think. There's no grid, so units can move anywhere. Users have to make the best decision every second using situational awareness, and they have to build their base, they have to train their units, they have to manage their resources, and then once they've trained their units, they send them out into the field and they have to fight. And then they're trying to beat someone who's on the other side of the pitch doing the exact same thing. So they break StarCraft 2 into two different distinct elements, the macro and the micro. And the macro is that building the base, training the units, managing the economy. And then the micro is the actual fight. Inside every fight, there's a paper, scissors, rock going on. There's strengths and weaknesses to every unit. You don't want one unit to drop because if you lose that, there is drastic effects that happen down that line. And StarCraft 2, particularly out of other games that we pull, they actually make AI bots that train to play the game and then verse those bots against each other because there's such a depth to this game and an unlimited skill ceiling. So when you look at the personas that come out of StarCraft, someone who is considered a bronze level player hits 60 actions per minute. And an action means that they click on something, that they move a unit, that they view the queue on how long it's taking to train a unit. Just click a touch of a button, one thing per second, but that's 60 actions per minute for the average of a 20-minute game. And then you take that to a Grandmaster level where they're doing 300 actions per minute, and that's over the course of a 20-minute game. And so how can they digest that information so incredibly quick to be able to make 300 decisions every minute? So, this is a, right, I love that, audible gasp. This is a typical fight that happens. It's actually only half of a fight that happens, but we won't worry about that. I know it looks like a lot, but there's method to this madness. There's a lot of interaction that's happening here that actually makes it a lot easier for a user to make decisions. And the first here I want to talk about are the health bars. So you see that in a fight, a lot of units actually overlap over each other, but they've made a distinct decision to make thick black bars sitting behind these health bars so that regardless of the VFX and any special effects that are happening, you can constantly see that health that's there. And that units that have that are bigger and have more health actually have more squares. So you already have inherent shape language to the way that those health bars are laid out. Now say that you need to select a unit. Say that the color code is green, they're nice and healthy, you don't have to worry about them. It goes to yellow, it's starting to be a concern. How do you select that unit? Instantly, firstly, you can actually see them because they go yellow, they go red. You know straight away without thinking, without making that cognitive load, that they're ready to get the hell out of the fight. So you grab, you click, you drag, and you make a box around them, and that selects a group of units. And you can see at the bottom there that that picture just there that has all the green units, and then you find the red unit in there or the yellow one. You click on them, instantly you have them selected. You can move them out. So you grab a bunch, you see the color you want, and you send them out. That bottom HUD that sits along there does a lot of things and is the main piece of UI that's focused in this game. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, you see what's called a mini-map, and that gives the user an overview of what's happening within the fight. And so even though they're focusing on the micro right now inside that crazy fight that's happening, they can look at the mini-map and see, is there any colored dots that are happening near my base? Are the enemy trying to get there? And so this interface actually allows the user to be both in macro and micro at the exact same time, which is something that I can't say about any UX design I've made. So it's a pretty impressive way, albeit an extreme way of showing interaction design. And so if you look at those two units, or those two personas again, you have the casual persona, casual, 60 times a minute. It's still faster than what I could do. Show me if I've missed something important and keep me in control of while I'm in the middle of a crazy fight. That you guys audibly gasped when you saw that. That's an anxiety driven even when you're controlling it itself. So how can the UI get out of the way of the user? They can just select everything, click the red, get them out the back there. They're in now control of the fight. And for the Grandmaster, we don't want to let the UI get in the way of what they're trying to do, and we want to let them what they need to do quickly. They need to make 300 decisions a second. So one thing that we didn't see here is that just above these units here, you have 1 through to 7, and they all have shortcuts, and those shortcuts have been created by the user prior to the fight. So they know that they've been in this situation 100 times. They know what the fight's going to be. So they select these 3 units and they say, you're group 1, and these set of units, you're group 2. So that when they get into the fight, when they're in the thick of it, they press one button and they can easily switch between the units that they need to, giving them that extra control and that rapid shortcut jumping back and forth. So the UI no longer becomes cumbersome and they don't have to manually try and select their way through a mass of units. So I want to take a step back and talk about different types of UIs. You have diegetic UIs and you have not diegetic UIs. Diegetic just meaning that it exists in the story, it exists in the narrative. And so a diegetic UI uses game objects that match the theme and the experience to show the interface and to show information to users. So for Fallout, for example, on the left-hand side, they have what's called a Pip-Boy, and it's a big, large Apple Ultra-looking watch thing with a similar DOS interface that they pull up, and then that's how they interact with everything they do in their world. Whereas Sea of Thieves, you assume the role of a pirate. Yes, even my talk has pirates. And so, yeah, it's very minimal in the UI, and you could walk out you're on the seven seas and you've done your Titanic and you've pretended that you're I'm flying Jack, and then you're wondering where am I going, where am I actually heading here? And rather than bringing up the menu, you have to run back inside your ship and look down at your map, and you can see where you're going, and that's how everything's shown to you there. So it's actually the opposite of good UX. It's, I wanted to know about it over there, but now I've got to run in here to find it. So while that's against what we do as UXers, it's a brilliant lesson in showing and not telling. And sometimes we just need to keep them in the experience and just show them rather than list out everything that they can do at every given moment. Whereas you look at non-diegetic UIs, that's typically what we're used to. It's your typical information architecture where you've got your skills, your list of skills, your items, your list of items. But that doesn't mean that it has to be as boring and minimalistic as and 100% functional. You can muck around with the dial of style versus function to show some. I see some giggles about Animal Crossing. That took a lot of our time in COVID for sure. And you see in Persona 5 over there where everything is extremely stylized, which can reduce the functionality of it, but can still keep people involved in your game. And the last thing I want to talk about is, so in the corporate design world, we have design systems and we have UI patterns, and with video games, it's no different. I want to talk about the health bar and the UI pattern as a health as a UI pattern. It's extremely important to the user because it is the literal life and death of that user. And so we need to be conveying that information at the right time. We need to be giving them the information that they need so they can make decisions on it. And so in a game that that I was in designing myself, we had a character that has a overhead health bar, and that sits above him. And then there's also up to 8 health bars that sit on the screen as well. And then also those are broken down into 4 teammates and 4 enemies. And so how can I provide the information while staying out of the player's way? So when we went to design and we had a look at all the different designs that we could deliver here, we had to think about what numbers are important. What do I need to show versus what do I need to tell? And in this case, the game would go, the conversation, you've got 30 seconds to make this turn. And I would say, I can do 20 damage. And he would say, I can do 15 damage and do 5 damage. And so you making these calculations rapidly to see if you can actually, take someone out, make them lose a life, for example. Whereas if we were just to show them a blue bar that was at 3/4 health, they wouldn't be able to make that information. So at that point, it was very important to tell them and show them that number as 150 rather than just give them that approximate bar. And that also allowed the other elements to kind of fall into the background. And here is a piece of interaction design that shows some damage being taken. So in this case, this user's lost 50 health. And so it starts at 100, and then they take the initial hit. And then so we show the chunk of health in a straight white bar, and that is the initial hit, that initial shock of receiving damage. And then that brings up the number, 50 damage that's happening, and then that slowly switches to red, and that's when the pain kind of sets in, and you're like, oh wow, I've actually been damaged. It's actually going to hurt. And then it slides down, and the numbers animate backwards like a free fall, like you don't know where it's going to stop. And then we add some extra effects there, such as game feel to provide screen shake. We shake it, which gives us 2 elements. It pulls attention as a UI element, and it shakes on the screen so people do look at it. They realize something's happening there, that it is of importance. And also to match that initial shock and that knockback of being hit. So it's a very visceral experience that happens in, a second, or not even that, 500 milliseconds. So we've seen 3 different cases here on how video games push the boundary of interaction design. And I hope with those 3 case studies, we've seen what inspiration we can gather from them and when we can actually reference each of those. With StarCraft showing the extreme case of interaction design, arming the user with the right info at the right time, and how can we pull that back and make that work for our users. Looking at styles of UI, we can take inspiration on what to show versus what we can tell. And then lastly, with the health bar, we can see that how we can lean on real-world interactions to fuel, real-world experiences to fuel those interactions. And maybe that if we can incorporate the ways that video games present UI and UX, maybe we can increase our own users' decision-making and with no less accuracy, and create a more engaging experience for our users. Thank you.